Hi everyone, welcome back. So where we last left off on session 5.1, we talked about creating a table, and here I'm back with my Atlantic COD data example. And for this module in session 5.2, starting on page 276, we're going to look at some other features of what we can do with this data. The two most exciting things we're going to talk about today is slicers, and we're also going to talk about pivot tables. Okay, so the idea is that while we talked about some strategies last time to organize and sort data using sort, sorry about that, using sort like this, or filtering, we are going to look at some other options today of how to do that. Okay, so we're going to start on page 278 with filtering. If I press one of these little drop downs next to where it says payment method, for example, I could, right now I have select all, so all these things are selected. Now normally I wouldn't get this view with normal data. It's only because we turned this into a table that I'm able to sort it automatically. Now I do have the normal sort functions that we looked at before, like from A to Z, from Z to A, which is basically numerically from biggest to smallest, or vice versa in this case. But I could also uncheck everything and press only cache. By doing this, it's going to show me only the things. So our data didn't disappear. It's still there. I don't have it anywhere else. It's in the table. Just because the filtering is turned on, which you could see now turned from a drop-down into a little filter symbol, it's only showing us part of our table. This is really useful if we want to see, for example, only the people who paid in cash, or only people who paid in cash and debit. It will give us just that part of the table. Whereas if we turn off filtering altogether, oops, if we turn off filtering altogether, then we would be able to see everything. So I'll click here, it will check everything, press OK, and then it will give us our entire list. Okay, so to get rid of a filter, if we have one selected, like say for example like cash, we could just click up here and press where it says clear filter from payment method. That will get rid of the filter. And we can also apply multiple filters. So let's say we want to see only cash, and we want to see only some purchase amounts. So right now we're able to select, but we also within here we can also filter and we could sort the data. Okay, so right now this is going to show me first filtered by cash and then filtered by these purchase amounts. So we basically have a subset of our data depending on the filters. To get rid of the filters, again, you just click remove and we'll clear the filters. Okay, so when we have a lot of data that we can quickly summarize, like let's do the same example, but here we'll click on store location, and we want to see only Fredericton, and then we want to see only credit. This will give us just those together. And then of course we can apply more filters if we're interested in that as well, or sort, let's say by alphabetical order. Okay, if you take a look at the bottom of page 282, it gives you a list of filters for options what we're able to filter, and basically we can filter text, numbers, and dates, which means that Excel will automatically recognize certain kinds of text or certain numbers or certain dates in a particular order, and this will help us quickly and efficiently sort the data. Okay, so now continuing on page 283 and 284, we have the number filter box. So let's just go back to what I did before. Right now I'm going to pick only Fredericton. Okay, so we have a smaller table of our data. And then we want to filter these amounts. So what we just did last time was click here and then select them. What we could do instead is click on number filters. And we could say equals, does not equal, greater than or equal to, the same as we did for conditional formatting. So let's press greater than or equal to, and then we get our custom auto filter box. And it's going to say if the purchase amount is greater to or equal than $10, and then we can keep on adding conditions if we want. But for now, this should be okay. And this will show us only amounts that are over $10. Okay, so in here we basically apply a number filter to grab only the numbers that we want, as well as right now we only have filters for Fredericton. Okay, so I'll just press clear the filters, and it works the same way. It brings us back to where we were. Okay, and as we talked about before, we're also able to sort. So we could sort from smallest to largest or largest to smallest, and it will automatically resort everything based on that column. same as we could do up here, right? But we could also do that just within the dialog box up here, which we could also turn off, right? And then we could go back to where we were. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is slicers, which is a super cool feature that allows us to give the option of sorting data to the user. So when we hand off the sheet, our users don't have to know how to use these features like we just learned about right now to filter and sort data. They could just click a button. Makes it a lot easier to read the sheet and a lot better to distribute the sheet. So let's go back to our payment method. I'm going to click on that column and press where it says design. Once I do, you'll notice under design table tools, I have this button called insert slicer. Okay, so I press that, and it's going to say what kind of slicer do you want to put in. So for now, we're only going to pick payment method. I'm going to press OK, and it's basically going to give me this dialog box, which is the same as we would have over here, right? Except now I could just click these and automatically go through them. I could also cancel by pressing this and get back to the default. And basically, this allows me to quickly go through my data and design an interface where I'm able to allow the users to sort through the data. This is really, really useful when I have a dashboard. So I have a bunch of different slicers going on, and then I'm able to allow the user to flip through the data quickly themselves. Okay, so similar to what we had before, I have this new slicer purchase amount. I can go through it and see the different items. The problem with this, though, is that unlike where it says cash, credit, debit, etc., for right now, each one of these represents one line, whereas these represent many lines, so I don't really want that. I want to be able to select multiple values at the same time. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to select anything under payment method, because that would shorten what I'm looking for. I'll leave this open. And I'm going to click on this button here with the checkboxes. And basically what that allows me to do is select multiple lines at the same time, and it will give me the option to see only those lines. Right? So basically it creates a filter that I can put quickly in, and it will show me all the data that's left over. And of course, I can clear it using the clear button. One more fast example. I just clicked in the table, went to design, insert slicer, and I picked the column called customer name. It gives me a list of all my customers. This is a lot easier to just scroll down and press, let's say, Tim Horace, and see exactly what he bought, right? So if I want to have a customer directory that I could really pull things up quickly and not necessarily see all the data because it might be harder to see or find, this would allow me to do that really fast. And I could do the same thing for, let's say, fish purchased. Working the other way, this slicer is going to give me a list of all the people who bought a particular kind of fish. So if I want to call everybody who bought salmon, I just press salmon, and boom, I get the list of phone numbers. And it also highlights here the names of the people who purchased, as well as I could see just visually right now from the payment slicer that no one who purchased salmon also paid in cash, right? You'll notice they're grayed out. So this is a really fast way to filter the data and allow some kind of control, particularly when these slicers are on a different page. So I could have my sheet down here called dashboard, and I could have some of these dialog boxes interface with, let's say, a graph that would only show me data on the graph based on the data on the table, and allow me to get through the information a lot quicker. Okay, so slicers aside, let's go back to, I'm just going to add one more slicer just so you can see it later. We'll do it by fish purchased. Okay, and I'll put the slicer off here on the side. So just for your reference, if you're interested, and we're going to keep on moving on. Right now, we're on page 288. Okay, so next we're going to talk about adding a summary line. Okay, so we're doing the example on page 288 in figure 5.23. Basically, I have my list of numbers. If I go down to the bottom, I could just click and check off where it says total row under table design tools, same place as we got the slicer, and just press total row, and it will add a total and put all these numbers together. You'll notice that it doesn't also calculate these numbers. It will basically only automatically calculate these numbers, and it's going to give us our subtotal 109 previous year. Okay, so this is going to be the total of this year. We could change by clicking on the total. We could change, are we trying to average, count, numbers, max, min, sum, etc. Right? So we have a lot of functionality built into this dropdown using the total row. Okay, but in addition to the total, we could also add a number of other ones on this total row, which is like a special row that we have. We can click here, which is now currently empty, and we could put average, count, count numbers, max, min, sum, def, etc. Now, because this fish purchase doesn't have numbers, we could press, for example, count, and it will go and tell us there's 30 entries. Whereas if we press count numbers, it will tell us 0 because there's no numbers in there. We could try max, min, etc. It's all going to give us zeros because the only thing that would work in this case is count, because it would just go look through and see how many entries do we have. Interestingly, when we use this in combination with our slicer, then it's going to tell us, oh, you only have 4 under this category. So it's giving us results right based on the numbers, right? Okay, and we could do the same thing in all the other categories. Again, it's important that we apply ones that actually make sense, because for phone numbers, none of these things would really matter, except again for count. But for debit, same idea. It would just go through and tell us there's 30 phone numbers, 30 types of payment methods. But here we could add in a subtotal that would make sense. Right? We could put in a sum and then compare this year to the previous year. Okay, and let's quickly look at split, which is on page 290. And this is really useful when you're dealing with a really big sheet with a lot of data. So I'm just going to go up into A1, and I'm going to press Control Home, setting as the active cell, and I'll click over here on 27, and I'm going to go into my View on the ribbon tab and go to where it says Split up here. Okay, you'll notice it creates a split. So now I could scroll, I could move the split if I want. I like to make it bigger or smaller, but I could basically use both of these sheets independently, although they're showing the same data. It's just like opening 2 views to the same sheet. So here I could see one part, and here I could see the other part. It's also possible to split the sheet side to side, so I can scroll sideways and see things even though the rest of it, the data stays here. So basically this is showing me the exact same table, I just get 2 different views to do it in. Okay, so for example, I could keep my slicer here not moving in this one, whereas here I could scroll on and keep on working on my data even if I can't see the slicer anymore. For example, that could be one reason to use it, or there could be many others. When you're done with the split view, you just check split again, and it puts all back together as one sheet. All right, so let's look at a really quick and cool way to do reports, and that is by putting in subtotals. Okay, so basically what it's going to do is we're going to take all of our customer IDs. In our case, each person only purchased an item once. But let's say we have a recurring customer who bought things a bunch of times. We want a quick way to put that all together and print it out into a report. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here to previous year, and we're going to go and convert this to a range. Okay, so we'll press convert to range, and it'll say, do you want to convert the table to a normal range? We'll press yes. Okay, so now this turned it back into a normal range, and it's no longer a table. And now we'll look at the subtotal. So we're going to go into data, and then we're going to press where it says subtotal over here. And it's going to say, at each change in customer ID, use function sum. So we're going to pick previous year and purchase amount. Press OK. And you'll see we get this new table, right, which allows us to open and close, as well as have different views depending on the variable that we're using. You'll notice that for here, this is our grand total. This is our total by customer number without all the other data inside of it. And this is the whole table. Now, it would be really, and we could also minimize the individual pieces. For example, if one customer had 100 purchases, we could just close it and we wouldn't see all the different pieces. So like, for example, this line is really a subset of line 19, but by closing it, we could shrink the whole thing. Since we only have one title for each subset, for each order, they're relatively small, but we could have a lot of orders for each customer. So this allows us to do this really quickly, and then we could use this to print it out, or copy this into a table, or use it as a report. It really depends on what we want to do with it. We could also use this as a basis to make graphs. Now, right now it's being sorted by customer ID, but we are able to sort it, let's say, by date or by a different variable. And if we do that, we can get a sales report that would show us for each date how many items were purchased in total. That's what it would give us using the same technique. Okay, so for our purposes, I'm going to turn this back into a table like we see over here. And in the next module, next session 5.3, we're going to get into pivot charts. But if you understand how table works and how we can filter and sort the data, then we're halfway there. Our slicer disappeared, so I'll add in a slicer just so you have a reference, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so the next module we're going to cover pivot tables, and we'll talk about some of the ways that we could organize and sort this data and build some really cool reports.